Welcome to the show. Thanks for joining in another week. Have a great show planned for you, but I will be by myself today. No guest, because we'll be talking a lot of college football. The bowl matchups are out. We'll be talking a lot about the bowl games. We'll be talking about players sitting out of bowls. We'll be talking about the playoff system. And later on the show, we even talk a little bit of Steelers, Pirates, and a little NBA basketball. But first, I want to start with a quote. And this one comes from one of my favorite football coaches of all time, perhaps my favorite college football coach, and that's Lou Holtz. I've quoted him before on this show, and he once said, "There's never a right time to do the wrong thing, and there's never a wrong time to do the right thing." When you first hear it, you may think, okay, right, wrong, wrong, right, but taking it in perspective and why he said that, it helps explain that quote a little bit more. In 1988, Notre Dame was ranked number 1 in the country and was playing in the season finale against number 2 USC. First time ever that the two teams were ranked number 1 and number 2. Last game of the year, and Notre Dame knowing that to play for a national championship, they would have to get by the number 2 ranked Trojans to get to being where they're playing for the title. So before the game, as they made the trip out to Los Angeles, got there a day or two early, Ricky Watters and Tony Brooks were late for a team function. Now, this is something that happened a number of times where these two players had been late, and they were star players, Ricky Watters and Tony Brooks, integral parts of that undefeated season up to that point. Lou Holtz had warned them if they were late again, they were going to be suspended. They were late. Now he's got this dilemma. What does he do? Two of his star players, they're going to be playing the number 2 team in the country, try to get to a national championship. It would be his first ever title, and 2 of his star players were late. He had warned them. He sent them home to South Bend, didn't let them play in the game. And when he was asked by reporters, that's when he said, there's never a right time to do the wrong thing and never a wrong time to do the right thing. I think perhaps describing both their conduct and his conduct all in one, but I think there's a lot of truth to that, which is that, look, it's easy to do the right thing at convenient times to do it. It's also, there's times you say, well, I did the wrong thing, but it doesn't really hurt me. I think his quote that there's never a wrong time to do the right thing and never a right time to do the wrong thing really makes sense. Telling those players that, look, you can't do the wrong thing just because you think I won't send you home because we're playing the number 2 team in the country. And even though it's hard for me to do this, I'm going to send them home. In fact, he was asked later on, did he ever have any regret about sending them home? He said, I had my first moment of regret ever as I drove them to the airport in Los Angeles. I watched Ricky and Tony get onto that plane, and as I saw it taking off to head back to South Bend, I had my first moment of regret. I said to myself, Lou, you should have made him walk back to South Bend. But a lot of truth to that. And it is hard to do the right thing sometimes when certain moments present us, but it will get us further ahead later on down the road. And that's when it really tests your character. And as it turns out, Notre Dame beat USC, went on to play number 3 ranked West Virginia in the Fiesta Bowl for the national championship. And of course, the Irish won that game over the 1988 national champions. So all worked out in the end anyway for Coach Holtz and the Irish. So I think that's just a quote to the kind of this time of year I thought was appropriate, and also just thinking about doing the right things. Speaking of a lot of controversy over doing the right things or not doing the right things, a lot of talk about college football players sitting out the bowl games. And of course here locally, a lot of talk about Will Grier. Of course also Yodny Kajus, the offensive lineman for the Mountaineers, also sitting out the bowl game. Speculation that others may follow. And we're seeing this around the country. And we've seen it in years past. Christian McCaffrey did it a couple years ago. Leonard Fournette at LSU did it. Becoming more and more prevalent where players that are projected to be high draft picks sitting out games that they are describing as meaningless, these bowl games that aren't perhaps a playoff game or a New Year's Day game, and saying, why am I going to risk injury when I'm projected to be a first-round NFL pick? And a lot of debate's been going on about this. Interestingly, I've talked to several former college athletes, and they all are on the side of the players. They basically say, hey, look, if the game is determined to be meaningless, meaning that you're not playing for a championship, then why risk the injury? You've got these millions of dollars you can make, take care of your family, do all these things, why risk it? Now, on the other hand, you have people saying, look, you committed to being a part of the team's season is still going on, you got a scholarship in exchange for being a part of that team, you should fulfill your end of the deal, which is finish out the season. West Virginia coach Dana Holgerson's come out saying he supports Will Grier and his decision not to play in the bowl game. I think that's certainly the wise PR thing to say with respect to attempting to recruit players and having to deal with other players. But I've really gone back and forth in this in my own mind. One thing that's available is sometimes these players can insure themselves through an insurance company like Lloyd's of London or something like that against injury, where it would pay out if they would be injured and their draft stock would fall, or if they would be unable to play, something like that. But you're also talking about your health, and these are young men who've played years and years of football, trying to reach the highest level where they can make it to where it's their profession, where they're getting paid to do it. And certainly that's the case with Will Greer. He's projected to be a high draft pick, and he looks at it and says, look, we're playing in the Camping World Bowl. Is that really worth risking it? Because what happens? Okay, so instead of being, perhaps 10-3, the team is 9-4. What's really the consequence of that one way or another? And also, some think there's an added benefit, which is, look, Allison, the backup quarterback, will now have an opportunity to practice as the first teamer for several weeks here leading up to the bowl game, get to, play, 70 meaningful snaps or something like that in a collegiate football game, which he hasn't had an opportunity to do, to get ready toward next year when it will help the team. So a lot of back and forth there. I have, as I said, very mixed feelings. I can see it both ways. I see it from the player's perspective. Will Greer's married, has a child, needs to be able to support them. On the other hand, I'm a big believer that if you commit to being a part of a team, whether you're a 7 or 8 year old playing on a Little League baseball team, or you're somebody playing at the collegiate or professional level, that when you commit to being on a team, you remain on that team until the season is over. Because my question is, where do we go from here? Let's say that a highly projected draft pick gets through his team's first 3 games of the season next year, and the team is 1-2. 1 win, 2 losses. This is, look, the season's basically over. We can't make it to a playoff. We're not going to make it to a New Year's Day game. I'm going to sit out the last 9 games of the regular season here. I don't want to risk getting hurt. What happens then? And perhaps he's even already graduated because they graduated in 3 years, or he was a redshirt, whatever it may be. I really struggle with that. I'm a big believer that it'd be good to look to a system where the players get paid, at least get paid something, so that they are receiving some monetary compensation for all they're going through. Because I've seen these players, it is a full-time job. It's not like going to school like a normal student, where it's like, okay, you're getting to play football and you're going to school. It's from 6 o'clock in the morning, where they're in the weight room, until 10 o'clock at night when they're done at the study hall. That's their life. And it's not just when football season is going on. They're right back at it in January. As soon as the bowl game's over, they're back at it again, conditioning, working out, lifting weights, going out on the field, throwing to the receivers, whatever it may be. So there are some changes that are definitely needed to be made in the college game, and I hope that everyone examines that going forward, because I'd like to see my favorite players playing. I'd like to watch the game and know, okay, this is really the Mountaineers playing Syracuse in this game, not some watered-down version of the Mountaineers. So we'll see what happens, but as it stands, a couple players will not be playing in that game, and some others around the country as well. We need to take a break. When I come back, continue talking about the playoff system, the Heisman Trophy Award, and other things. Stay with us here on the Jamie Bordas Show.
When reviewing your oil and gas offers or royalty check statements, do you wonder, am I being offered a fair amount? Do I feel comfortable reading the statement? Do I have peace of mind? If you answered no to these questions, you need Bordas Mineral Management. Our passion is helping mineral owners protect and expand their mineral wealth. Our examiners tell you whether you're being treated fairly and getting paid what is rightfully yours. Bordas Mineral Management. Be protected. Have peace of mind.
Recommended by the highest authorities. Danoon Lumber.
Looks like a bad one's coming. Yeah. Right?
Welcome back to the show. We've been talking college football and talking about a little bit more here, the college football playoff. Of course, a 4-team playoff, and a lot of talk recently about should the playoff be expanded, especially this year with Georgia sitting at number 5, Ohio State at number 6, an undefeated University of Central Florida team, second year undefeated in a row, and not getting an opportunity. And I've been a proponent for a long time now of an 8-team playoff with the 5 Power 5 conference champions getting an automatic bid and then 3 wild cards. And speaking of conferences, there's been a lot of talk about conferences, and Notre Dame, of course, one of the 4 teams picked for the playoff this year. One of my preseason picks, of course, I had Notre Dame, Alabama, Clemson, and WVU. I hit 3 of the 4. The other was a Big 12 team. It just happened to be Oklahoma instead of the Mountaineers. But a lot of talk about Notre Dame not being in a conference, and should that exclude the Irish from being in the college football playoff? And here's my opinion on that. First of all, being in a conference, and certainly being a conference champion, is not a requirement to being in the playoff. The whole system was designed to get the 4 best teams. And we've had 2 occasions where teams that are in conferences but weren't conference champions have been in the playoff, in Alabama and Ohio State in years past. Alabama didn't win their conference last year and won the national title. So being in a conference is not a predicate, or winning your conference certainly is not a predicate to being in the playoff. And for people that say, well, look, Notre Dame should have to join a conference like everyone else doesn't have to join a conference. They choose to join a conference. You have to remember, the conferences and these power conferences were basically formed because Notre Dame got its own TV deal with NBC back in the early 1990s. Before that, we didn't have the wealth of college football games on TV every week like we do now. You might get 1 or 2 games, but then Notre Dame struck a deal where their home games were going to be on TV every week with NBC. Teams started looking for ways to get on TV, looking for ways to make more money, and these power conferences started to be formed. That's why you don't have the rivalries between WVU and Pitt anymore, WVU and Virginia Tech, WVU and Syracuse like we had back in the 20 years ago or so. So that's why these conferences came to be. It was for revenue sharing and for TV deals. So that's what really came to be. And then now you've got these power conferences. Now, what happened as you got those conferences is there was a thought of, okay, how do we now get the best teams playing for the title? Because you had these old conference tie-ins where you still have some now. The Big Ten champ, the Pac-12 champ go to the Rose Bowl, for example, unless they get picked for the playoff. But you had all these conference tie-ins, and the idea was, let's match up the best teams. Let's not have all these traditional tie-ins. Now, has that hurt the bowl system? I think it has. I think that's why you're seeing some players not participating in these bowl games, as I talked about earlier in the show, like Will Greer and others. But the playoff, the good news is that we no longer have a system where perhaps the number 1 team in the country is facing the number 10 team in its bowl game, and you don't really know who was number 1. In the olden days, say the number 1 team was out of the Big Ten at any given time, well, they had to play then the Pac-10, now the Pac-12 champ, and that team could be like Washington this year, not overly highly ranked. And then, okay, what did that really tell us? The number 1 team beat the number 10 team or the number 11 team, whatever. Didn't tell us a lot because, maybe 2 played 6 and 3 played 7. We really don't know who the true champ was. So the idea was to get the best teams. So this system has helped that, and that's what we want to do. Regardless of whether it was a conference champ or not, we want to make sure we try to get the best teams, and these, so-called experts on the College Football Playoff Committee try to do that, regardless of conference affiliation or conference title. So I would like to see, though, some conference tie and go, because I don't always know. There could be a team that has 2 losses and is a conference champ that may be better than any of the teams in another Power 5 conference. There may be a team that surged late, had a slow start to the season, but it's won 8-9 games in a row. I'd like to see them in. So I'd like to see more teams have an opportunity to get into the playoff so that we can see at the end of the year who truly is the best. And as some people have alluded to, Washington State's Mike Leach is a great example. We do this in every other area of sports. We do it in high school football. We do it in Division II, Division III, Division I AA, which is the FCS football championship subdivision in Division I. We do it in all these other divisions. Why can't we do it here? It's not that hard. Well, there's an easy reason for that, which is that the bowls still have a lot of power. And until that starts to go away, which I think it is, it'll stick at 4 teams, but I don't think it's going to be for long. I think it'll ultimately go to an 8-team system. So I hope that happens. I'd like to see it the 5 power conferences get automatic bids, 3 wild cards. Your 3 wild cards this year would arguably be Notre Dame, perhaps UCF, and then looks like Georgia would be in as well, in addition to the teams that are already in, and Ohio State being in the mix as well. And then you get a team out of the Pac-12, which would be Washington this year. So I'd like to see all those teams have an opportunity and play it out and see what happens on the field. The Heisman Trophy was given out this past Saturday, and interestingly, all year long, it seemed like Alabama's Tua Tagovailoa, whose name I probably didn't exactly get right there, was the leader in the clubhouse and was going to win the Heisman Trophy. But Kyler Murray came out late Great performance against West Virginia, against Texas in the Big 12 championship, and won the Heisman Trophy. The first time ever in college football history that a player took over for a Heisman Trophy winner at the same position and won the Heisman himself. Of course, Baker Mayfield winning it last year. There have been players from the same school win it back-to-back years. Army's Mr. Inside and Mr. Outside back in the 40s, wanted two different running backs. But first time a player took over for another player. And, I think that Jalen Hurts coming in to the SEC championship game against Georgia and leading them from behind and really ended up costing Tua the Heisman Trophy, even though he had a great season. But these two will both get a chance to show what they can do again in the college football playoff, and it'll be exciting. And, of course, in there with them as well will be Ian Book, who's got an unbelievable completion percentage with Notre Dame. And then the young star in Lawrence down at Clemson, the quarterback there, the freshman who replaced Kelly Bryant. That'll be fun to watch as well. So a lot of great quarterbacks in the playoffs this year will be fun to watch. We need to take a break. When I come back, we'll talk about the early bowl games here this bowl season and some of my thoughts on those. Stay with us here on the Jamie Bordas Show.
Lifetime of saving starts here. Belmont Savings Bank, focused on your future.
So, how was your first day?
Mom. So, Josh asked me about you.
Daddy's home. Go get him.
For your home, for your life, for more than 50 years. The Hardwood Specialists, DeNoon Lumber.
Welcome back to the show. We've been talking college football. We'll continue on here. I want to give you some games to watch before the college football playoff, before New Year's Day. And I'll give you 3 before Christmas and 3 after. I like to do things in threes, just like there are 3 wise men. I'll give you 3 before Christmas and 3 after. And starting off with a Saturday game on December 15th. That's this Saturday, the Las Vegas Bowl between Arizona State, which will be a fun team to watch, and Fresno State. And, Arizona State, you have to start off with their coach, Herm Edwards. A lot of people thought he's going back after being out of coaching for a number of years, going to the college game, which he's been away from for even longer, and had a really great year, 7-5. But they're going to be facing Fresno State, who finished 11-2, and bested Boise State in the conference championship in overtime. Really exciting game there, and they're actually up to now being ranked number 21 in the country. I like Fresno State in this one, even though I think Herm Edwards will keep his team close. Fresno State pulls this one out. And then Thursday, December 20th, a game of local interest, perhaps the Gasparilla Bowl between Marshall and the University of South Florida. Of course, still a lot of Marshall graduates in the local area, not as many as WVU graduates, but still a number of people that went to Marshall. And Thundering Herd with a respectable 8-4 season, but had this game that they kind of came up with at the last minute to play Virginia Tech because both teams had a game canceled earlier in the year. And Virginia Tech kind of put it on Marshall, beating them by 3 touchdowns to finish off the season. I'm not sure how wise it was to play that game on Marshall's part, but nonetheless, it was played. And they're playing the University of South Florida, who has lost now 5 games in a row after starting off the season 7-0, finished 7-5. Now, they did face some tough competition down the stretch compared to what they played earlier in the year, but you never want to be in a 5-game losing streak. But Charlie Strong, a good coach down there at the University of South Florida, of course, the former Texas and Louisville head coach, longtime coach at Florida on the defensive side of the ball, had been the defensive line coach at Notre Dame. Charlie Strong will get that team right. I think they beat the Thundering Herd in this bowl game, but it'll be good to watch. Then the following Saturday, December 22nd, the Armed Forces Bowl between Houston and Army. Army coming off the win against Navy, and that game's always a great game. The final game of the season kind of caps off the regular season college football year between Army and Navy, and of course a lot of pomp and circumstance last weekend involved with that game, the president being there and everything else. But Army, one of its best season in years, 10-2. Great to see that program back on track. They took Oklahoma to the wire. Remember, it took Oklahoma overtime to beat Army by a touchdown that could have really messed up Oklahoma's entire season. But they'll face a Houston team now that was 8-4, but a really high-scoring team. I just don't think Army can keep up with that high-scoring offense that Houston brings to the table. I think Houston wins this game in the Armed Forces Bowl. And then the following Thursday, we'll get to the three after Christmas games I'm going to give you now. Thursday, December 27th, the Pinstripe Bowl at Yankee Stadium between Miami and Wisconsin, two programs that were really popular playoff picks in the preseason and teams that people thought would do really well, and both disappointing 7-5 years. And the Hurricanes lost 4 in a row in the middle of the year before finishing with wins against Pitt and Virginia Tech. Wisconsin, just a downer. I mean, they lost to some good teams in Penn State, Michigan, Northwestern, but just not the type of year that you're used to seeing Wisconsin have. It's going to be interesting contrast of styles. Wisconsin running the ball, pounding at you. Miami trying to use its speed. I think the weather might make a difference in this one. Being played in New York at Yankee Stadium, Wisconsin a little bit more used to that type of weather than Miami. I never feel like the Canes play well when they come up north. Take Wisconsin in this one, but it'll be a fun game to watch because of that contrast of styles. Then, of course, on Friday, December 28th, one that people really be paying attention to around here, the Camping World Bowl between number 16 WVU and number 20 Syracuse. Who knows what you're going to get with the Mountaineers? New quarterback, other players could be replacements. I think the offense will still produce and be high scoring, and it better be because Syracuse has put some points on the board all year, with the exception of maybe the game against Notre Dame where their quarterback got hurt in the first quarter, but they were already struggling. But the Orange has found a way to put points on the board, so the Mountaineers better do that as well. I think this one will be a tight game the entire way, but I think the Mountaineers will feel like they have something to prove. That, hey, we weren't just Will Greer. We can play too, these other guys. I think they find a way to get it done, and the Mountaineers win the Camping World Bowl. And then later that night, the Alamo Bowl, a game that a lot of Mountaineer fans thought the Mountaineers should be in. That'll pit number 24 Iowa State against number 13 Washington State. And, of course, Iowa State beat the Mountaineers earlier in the year, giving them the edge in terms of the conference standings. They've only lost one game since September, Iowa State. I mean, they've really gotten on a roll, got a young quarterback that's really sharp. Washington State, a very high-scoring team and a great quarterback in its own right. Mike Leach, never know what he's going to pull out of his hat, good or bad. That's the thing you never know about. But I just think too much offense for Washington State. Look, if not for a late season loss in the final regular season game to their rival Washington, they may have been in the playoff hunt. Just depending on what would have happened in that Pac-12 championship game. So I like Washington State to win that game, beat Iowa State in the Alamo Bowl. Next week, the week after, we'll talk about the big games in the playoff. We'll talk about the New Year's Day games. But we need to take a break. And when I come back, we'll be talking about the Steelers and their third loss in a row. Stay with us here on the Jamie Bordas Show. People in nursing homes are some of the most vulnerable members of our society. They're there because they can't take care of themselves. Those facilities have a duty to take care of our loved ones. And when they don't, it's important they're held accountable. We've not only collected record results against negligent nursing homes, but more importantly, we've helped so many families get the answers and closure they so badly needed.
Bordas and Bordas, fighting for justice.
Ho, 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 ho. Call Panhandle. Oh, thank goodness.
Panhandle Cleaning and Restoration is ready to handle any size emergency at a moment's notice. From our family to yours, Merry Christmas.
Thank you. Oh, ho, 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 ho.
Welcome back to the show. It's time to talk a little bit of professional sports and start off with the Pittsburgh Steelers. What has happened to the Steelers? Gone from 7-2-1 to 7-5-1 here all of a sudden. And what has happened to Chris Boswell, the kicker that seemed so reliable last year, got the big deal in the offseason and now has missed 6 field goals, 5 extra points on the season, and can't seem to make anything, especially when it matters. Of course, the disappointing loss this week to the Oakland Raiders, who had only 2 wins coming into the game, and Boswell slips going to kick a game-tying field goal, falls on the ground, and there goes another potential win for the Steelers. Instead, now the worst record of any division leader in the NFL. And really, fighting for a playoff spot, because when you look at the AFC, they're really only now a half game ahead of the Ravens, and if they don't win the division, whoever doesn't win the AFC West between the Chargers and the Chiefs is going to get one of the wild card spots, and then now a whole bunch of other teams will be fighting for that other wild card spot, and the Steelers have the Patriots, the Saints, and then the Bengals, who are going to be out for blood, to finish the season. So, really the Steelers have put themselves in a real predicament. Some head-scratching decisions being made, again, by the head coach this week. Ben Roethlisberger leaves the game with an injury, is on the sideline, comes back in. Mike Tomlin says he could have played. He was fine to play. We just felt like we were in a rhythm, which didn't make any sense at all with Josh Dobbs, because there seemed to be no rhythm at all. The offense wasn't doing anything really with Dobbs in the game. So I talked about last week. It just seems like the decisions this year have not been good. And I've been a defender of Mike Tomlin for a long time, but I'm really scratching my head here the last couple of weeks. And now the Steelers get the Patriots at Heinz Field. That will help. But all of these distractions and turmoil and Tom Brady coming to town, I do like the Steelers to win this game. I think they have to get back on track at some point. A big game at Heinz against the Patriots is the perfect time to do it. The Steelers, in a very close one this week, beat the Patriots at Heinz Field. And you're looking at the rest of the league, and there'll be some real fights here for playoff spots at the end. In the NFC, the Saints and Rams are in good shape. But now the Cowboys ahead 2 games in the NFC East. You would have never thought that several weeks back. The Cowboys have won 5 games in a row. Amari Cooper tearing it up now at wide receiver. Seattle looking good with the lead, in the wild card race, and really people didn't expect Seattle to be this type of team this year, I think, but they've really come on. So it'll be interesting to watch what happens down the end of the stretch of the season here, and we'll keep an eye on that. Big news, just as we were getting ready to come on the air here, the Pirates trading Ivan Nova to the Chicago White Sox. Not even reported yet what the Pirates will get in return. We'll keep an eye on that as we move forward, but the Pirates need some bats and to go with some of the pitching they have. And I want to mention the NBA for a moment. Had a chance to go up to Cleveland last week and watch the Golden State Warriors play in Cleveland, and Steph Curry, coming off of a long stretch where he missed some games due to a hamstring injury, just really lit it up. 42 points. Then again, this week, a 38-point game against Minnesota, and really looking good. The Western Conference Finals Player of the Week, and the Warriors are starting to click again now that the players are all getting healthy. Draymond Green back in the lineup, Steph Curry back in the lineup, and they haven't even gotten DeMarcus Cousins into the games yet this year. That won't happen until after Christmas, so they'll have 5 All-Stars in the lineup once he gets into the mix. So Golden State Warriors looking awfully, awfully good, and as are the Toronto Raptors in the East. That's all the time we have this week. Hope you enjoyed all the talk about college football. We'll see you again next time on The Jamie Bordas Show.